Thank you, Dennis, for a wonderful talk. Um, I can't see everyone on my screen. I can only see 25 of the 29 people here. So not everybody might have seen this, but right when Dennis said you might leave, a whole bunch of leaves went past Matt, who's out on his back. I guess it's his back porch or something like that. It's very cool. So, yeah. Are there any questions?
I have a question, Judy.
Sure.
Um, Building off of what Dennis just said, does that mean that if we contemplate our own death more often, we will be happier in some sense?
I have no idea. It depends how you contemplate it. Um, but it's not about contemplating death. It's about being reminded. So it's being reminded who we are. So we have this false idea of who we are. And part of this false idea is this notion of permanency, that like this little marble, and somehow nothing's going to destroy this little marble. And this marble's going to roll around, and some people, like classical Buddhism, this marble goes from one body to another body, and you die, and then goes to another body, except in Buddhism there isn't a marble, but that's sort of the image people have. You're reborn, right? And then in other religions there's a heaven or a hell, and you go to that heaven or you go to that hell. And in Greek mythology there's this afterlife where characters just kind of drift around and they remain Achilles or Hector or whoever they were, and Helen of Troy, and they're just still down there, sort of like ghosts, wherever that is. But there's this sort of idea of this kind of persistence of self, this persistent self that just keeps going. And that's so when you talk about contemplating death, when you think of it that way, usually that's aimed at this persistent self, imagining this persistent self. What's going to happen to this persistent self? Is it going to have to go before the four kings, of East Asian mythology, or is it going to go before Saint Peter? Or, what's going to happen to it, right? And it's still this notion of this persistent self. But that's just a construct. That isn't who we truly are. So, in some sense, there are no boundaries. There's not a Judy over here and a Jonathan over there. It doesn't really work that way. And so, seeing this true self and not contemplating it, but perceiving it, because contemplating means you're making up ideas, right? You have ideas about it. But not having ideas about it, this true self, perceiving this true self, that's what's important. And then, we croak. It's okay. Well, it's all right. So not holding anything, including our idea of this here. Just don't hold anything. Completely open. So it's not contemplation, it's perception. Perceiving your true self. So thank you very much for your question. Are there any other questions?
Judy, I have a question.
Sure.
I what does it mean, the middle way, when we talk about the middle way in Buddhism? Because I hear different things. And I think, isn't that the phrase I think that Igor used this morning?
Yeah, I'm so glad you asked, because he used it not in the way that I use it. So, okay, so the middle way. So, the middle way popularly is seen as sort of Goldilocks. Not too hot, not too cold. Not too tall, not too short. Not too dark, not too light. Not too sweet, not too sour. And I could go on and on and on, but I'll stop right there, right? So that's how we tend to see the middle way. You don't want to eat too much, you don't want to eat too little. You don't want to exercise too much, you don't want to exercise too little. You don't want to sleep too much, you don't want to sleep too little. That's in the popular conception. That's what the middle way is. And I don't want to put down that way of talking about it, because that is one way of looking at it, of using those words. So you can use the words the middle way to point to Goldilocks. Not too much, not too little. But technically, in Madhyamaka Buddhism, and Madhyamaka Buddhism, the great figure in that, the founding figure, is Nagarjuna, and I'm teaching a class in Nagarjuna in 2 weeks. So in Mahayana, you basically have Madhyamaka and you have Yogacara. Those are the two big schools. And Yogacara is mind alone, and Madhyamaka is the middle way. But the middle way is not Goldilocks. And it sounds like it's very technical philosophically, and it sounds very difficult philosophically. So basically, if I say, well, I'll look at Matt's screen because he's got this big blue sky. So if I say, the sky is blue, that's true, the sky is blue. And then I say, the sky is not blue. That's true, the sky is not blue, okay? And our ordinary thing, we say, oh, no, look at the screen, the sky is blue, like that. But Madhyamaka says to say the sky is blue is false, and to say the sky is not blue is false. And that's the middle way. Not yes, not no. Not is not. And it's much more technical because it's a thing called now I'm forgetting what's tetralemma, the tetralemma, which is actually 4 statements: is not, and I think it's is and is not is and is not, something like that. And I actually wrote a little thing for Buddha Dharma about it, which they gave a strange title to. They called it something like The Mathematics Never Adds Up or something like that. But anyway, it's online somewhere. But what it's really pointing to is that any ideas that we have, even like the sky is blue, okay? Maybe you're colorblind. You can't see blue. So what does the sky is blue mean to you? So blue is a construct. Creatures who have certain kinds of eyes, there are other creatures who supposedly can't see color at all, and others who can see much bigger color spectrum than we can, So blue is a construct that comes out of our body, that, most of us can see the color blue, and that we have the kind of minds that make up words. So it's a construct. Sky is a construct. Oh, there are the leaves again. It's like Matt's under confetti. There's a parade and they're raining confetti on him. So sky is a construct. And that's an interesting construct, because if you look over the history of humanity, the notion of sky has really changed. You used to have gods living in the sky and floating around in the sky, and the sky was kind of the realm of the gods. And then, you had the idea of, I don't know, Stan knows this stuff because he's a scholar of ancient Greece. I don't know, like, when people figured out that the atmosphere actually ends at some point. If you climb high mountains, you notice that it gets thin. But when did people figure out that there's a vacuum outside of what we call the sky? And when did people figure out, that everything doesn't revolve around the earth, but the earth revolves around the sun, and the sun, we're part of a galaxy, and that galaxy in itself is rotating, and then galaxies rotate around other galaxies. Every time we do something like that, we're changing our notion of sky. This very simple notion of sky is a construct, and its meaning has changed over time. So what this middle way is really pointing to, it seems very technical. How can you say, you can't say is and you can't say is not? How, this in some sense doesn't make sense. But if really deeply into it, what it's pointing to is it's pointing to not knowing. It's pointing to everything that we think we count on is made up. And that in turn is pointing to emptiness. And I don't want to say any more because I want everyone to come to the class. Uh, so when you come to the class, you'll get a lot more of this. But yeah, so what is the middle way? Well, there's sort of the common folk way of thinking about it, which is valid. That's how people think about it. But then it's also this very technical thing, which ultimately what it's pointing to is don't know. So thank you very much for your question. Yeah, when Igor said that, so this was the last session of Whole World as a Single Flower this morning, and they were talking about preservation of nature and the planet and the terrible damage that human beings have done and how we can rectify. And it was really quite wonderful. But yeah, Igor said that about the middle way, and I kind of perked up. And I wanted to raise my hand, no, Igor, no. But, but it's valid. And that is a valid thing. It's true. You shouldn't be to this or to that. I mean, so that also has roots in Buddha's teaching, because what happened to Buddha, first he's this prince. He's got everything. He's living in a gated community. He's got a Lamborghini. He's got the biggest screen TV you can ever imagine, the highest class phone with the highest class camera. He's got a wolf gas range, in the servant's kitchen that they're cooking him food on. I mean, he's got everything, absolutely everything. The newest Nike shoes, he's got it. And then he realizes that's like, like Dennis said, that's distracting. It's just distracting. I'm not going to do that anymore. So then what happens? Then he goes out he leaves the palace. He gives his clothes to a beggar and takes the beggar's clothes. The beggar's very happy, takes the beggar's clothes. And then he practices very ascetic practices for a long time with two different teachers. And he's so dharmically talented that one after another, these teachers wanted him to become their successors. And he said, no, because what that was all about gaining various states of consciousness. And Buddha's great question was, why is there suffering? Not why am I suffering? Because he wasn't suffering originally, but why is there suffering? And so that's the nut he had to crack. That's the thing he had to really perceive. Why is there suffering? And attaining higher and higher in quotes, mental states, spiritual states, that's not going to answer that question. And then he with 5 companions, he, was in the forest. He was in the forest the whole time. And, went through these, not eating, not drinking, not sleeping, not washing, not, just these ascetic practices that almost killed him. And finally, some young woman, sees him and gives him a little bit of milk. And vegans think it's soy milk, and non-vegans think it's cow's milk, but it gave him something with a little bit of protein, a little bit of nutrition. And he realized, asceticism wasn't the way either. So in some sense, this sense of middle way also goes back to Buddha. Not indulgence, not asceticism, but in the middle. So I don't want to put it down, because it does go back to Buddha, and it's a very useful notion. But I'm, having been a mathematician, I guess I'm very fond of the Madhyamaka version of the middle way. So thank you, Jennifer. We have time for one more question with a short answer.
I have a question.
Sure.
So, well, first, I'm so happy that you're able to see the leaves. It was beautiful. I wish you all could have seen them. And so my question was, I was reading Zen Master Song's The Compass of Zen, and he was talking about the 3 treasures. And the last one, I believe, was sangha.
Yeah.
And I always sort of understood sangha to be, community, I guess. And he added something to it that I wasn't familiar with, which is like this ethical code he mentioned. And I didn't quite understand that part. So I'm not sure if you had any thoughts, if you remember what he had sort of written about that ethical code, and there is that sort of ethical code, where does it come from? Who says there is one?
Okay, so there's two kinds of ethics in Buddhism. And one of the ones that there's no reason not to, for anyone not to do it. And it's, in fact, is part of our true nature. When we realize we're not separate, then it's completely natural. And that is, as Dennis said, my life is not for me. So that code of ethics is not even like situational ethics. It's just this deep perception that you and other people are not separate. And then your actions necessarily will not be about yourself. They will not be about getting more money or getting more status or whatever. You know, they won't be about anything like that. They'll be about really genuinely helping other people. So that's that kind of ethics. Then there are precept-based ethics. And so the word sangha originally referred to the monks and the nuns. It referred to people who had taken vows, and hundreds and hundreds of vows, very precise vows of what kinds of behaviors are allowed and what kind of behaviors are not allowed. And some of them are very general. In fact, we're going to be joining in the North American. We're going to do an online precept ceremony the second weekend of December. The time is not exactly set, and we have at least 6, maybe 7 people who will be taking precepts then. And the first 5 precepts: don't lie, don't kill, don't steal, don't do bad things out of lust, don't take intoxicants in order to induce heedlessness. Now, it's okay to have a beer, you know, if it doesn't make you too fuzzy and incapable, but it's not okay to say, oh, goddamn, I'm going to have it. You know, that's not okay, you know. So, so those are the first 5 precepts. So there's this monastic code and this code of ethics, which is very precise. So that's the other kind of ethics. And traditionally, you studied that before you started meditation. So traditionally, correct behavior in the sense of getting rid, you know, we think meditation is the way to get rid of our ego, but another way to get rid of your ego is to be a novice in a monastery and they're working you 20 hours a day and you don't have a minute's free time and you don't have any private space and you have, oh, Allie knows when the precept ceremony is. It is December 12th, 4 p.m. Thank you. I did not know that. Thank you. All right, that's 4 p.m. Eastern time. So it's 3 p.m. our time. Our time for those of us in the West. Anyway, so you work people really, really hard. You give them no place for their ego to grasp anything. And that's another way to attain this ethics, you know. So yeah, so sangha can't exist without some kind of ethics, because without ethics, people are at each other's throats. If you're in it for you, well, if you're in it for you and I'm in it for me, then we're going to be fighting all the time. You know, I want that last piece of cake. No, I want that last piece of cake. You know, we're not going to split it down the middle. And nobody's saying, oh, it's a small piece, you have it, you know, because we all want that piece of cake. So getting rid of that mind is very important. So yeah, sangha and ethics, they can't be separated, because you can't have sangha without some sense of ethics. And ethics, the broadest sense, is not as a code, but what the code is really pointing to is this not for me mind. So that's what it's about, not for me. Okay? And I always have to clarify, that doesn't mean it's not for me like, oh, you like Lamborghinis, but they're not for me. Not in that sense. But in the sense of my life is not about me. My life is, well, I don't know what it is. I don't want to say it's about all beings, because that sets up this, oh, I'm such a good person and you're so helpful, you know, which is just as bad as being selfish, right? It's another form of selfishness. But just we're all in this together. That's the best way to put it. We're all in this together, and really recognizing that. And then everything we do in our lives comes from that. So thank you for your question. And now it's time to stop, and you can stop recording.